Chapter 52. Winter arrived. Snow covered the mountain tops, and the reds and greens of the landscape became a brilliant white. School children were given a New Year's holiday, and Yiping was given permission to return home. I wanted to go home, too. A telegram arrived from my father, giving me an excuse to apply for a special leave. It read, "Father hospitalized, mother broken arm. Hurry home." I was disturbed by the news and went to Team Leader Huang's home. He was sitting down to eat his dinner. In the mountains, it was customary for the head of a household to eat alone. His children and his wife were not allowed to sit with him and were nowhere to be seen. He invited me in, and I showed him the telegram and asked him for 2 weeks of leave. "It's dinner time," he said. "Sit down and we can talk about it." "I need to return to my hut to have dinner with Cuihua," I told him. "Tell you what," he said. "If you drink 3 cups of wine with me, I'll grant you the leave." I needed his authorization, so I agreed. I seated myself across from him at the table. He poured me a cup of wine, poured one for himself, and offered a toast to a long life. He emptied his cup in 1 gulp, and I sipped mine twice before returning it to the table. "Drink the wine if you want your leave," he teased. I forced myself to do as he required, and, following his example, tipped the cup back and swallowed the wine. It burned in my throat as it went down. He chuckled mischievously and refilled our cups. He drank his down and insisted I do the same. I felt I had no choice but to obey. My face flushed, and I felt lightheaded. "Team Leader Huang," I said, I don't think I can have another. Can't you give me the permission now?" "We have a deal," he said. He raised 3 fingers in the air. 3 cups of wine, not 2, 3. He poured a 3rd cup. We clinked our cups together and drank them. My stomach grumbled and I felt I needed to throw up. I was unsure I could stand. "May I have your permission?" I asked. He leered across the table at me in the light of the flickering kerosene lantern. "I will have to think about it," he said. "Team Leader Huang," I said, slurring my words. You just promised. You promised me if I drank 3 cups of wine." "I'll think about it," he said, his face aglow in the light of the kerosene lamp and his eyes glistening. "I'm leaving," I said and rose, steadying myself with my hands on the table. "You don't have to go yet," he said, and reached out to grasp my wrist. I pulled away and opened the door and stepped out into the cold night air. In the flesh, he was behind me. His heavy breath was on the back of my neck. "Don't go," he slobbered. His arms snaked around my waist. I twisted loose and moved aside. "I told you to wait," he grunted behind me. "I'm not finished with you yet." I ran across his yard and headed up the mountain toward my hut, gasping, stumbling, red-faced, frightened, and embarrassed. When I burst into our hut, Cui-Hua was seated at the table eating. She looked up at me, surprised, and asked, "What happened to you?" "I tried to get permission from team leader Huang to go home," I cried. She smiled and shook her head. And team leader Huang said, "If you drink 3 cups of wine with me, right?" She knew exactly what he'd done. "Yes." She shook her head. "That's the requirement for all the girls," she said. 3 cups of wine and his hands all over you for a few minutes. I ran away from him, I said, and seated myself across from her. "In that case," she said, "I doubt if he'll ever let you leave." I broke into tears. Cui-Hua looked at me and sighed. "We're here to learn from the peasants." She sounded like the authorities when we left our homes. "Learn from the poor and lower middle peasants," she proclaimed. When I looked up, she was smiling at me, but there were tears in her eyes. The next day I found Yiping before he departed and told him what had happened. "Oh, that lecherous old fart," he said. "Let me see what I can do. I'll take care of it." He smiled at me confidently. That night, there was a familiar soft tapping on my wooden window shutter. I got up and let Yiping in. "I got you the permit," he whispered proudly. "How did you do it?" "My friend is a party member. He accompanied me to call on team leader Huang. I told Huang I'd come to help you get a permit to leave. My friend said he'd been hearing certain things about Huang. He said the other party members were upset and were considering writing a criticism to the commune headquarters." Huang was frightened. My friend said he'd persuade the others not to write the report, and Huang gave you authorization for leave. "What did he say?" "He said you can go." "We have to leave right away," he said, "before the old fart changes his mind." We beamed at each other I'll come for you at daybreak, he said. Be ready. A few hours later, Yiping and I raced down the mountain to the bus stop. What do you do when you are in Wuhu? I asked. I read. I sleep late. I go for walks. I practice calligraphy. I see movies. Do you visit Mirror Lake Park? I asked. I've heard it's very romantic in the winter. I was surprised at my boldness and I blushed. I've heard that too, he said and smiled. Maybe we can go for a walk there together some afternoon. We sat side by side on the bus and watched out the window as the world passed by. Each time the bus turned a corner, we leaned into each other. I felt myself warm as our bodies pressed together, but I dared not look into his eyes when it happened. My home was half an hour's walk from the bus stop. Yiping helped me carry my luggage home. I had been worried about my parents, but Mama and Papa were overjoyed to see me. Papa had become ill with malaria and had been hospitalized for several days. While caring for him, Mama had slipped on the ice on her way to the market and had broken her arm. Although my brother was able to help them, he was not very good at shopping, cooking, or cleaning. A friend sent the telegram, Mama said, because she really could use my assistance and because she thought it might be a good excuse for me to come home. Mama welcomed Yiping also and asked him to stay and join us for dinner. In the following days, I was able to help with chores around the house and visit Papa in the hospital. Yiping came by every morning to accompany me to the market, and he helped me lug home coal that I bought at a government supply store. After things were settled at home, I visited Yiping at his apartment and met his parents and his sister. We walked together in the snow around Mirror Lake Park. Yiping and I spent nearly every day with each other during our stay in Wuhu. We ate our meals at his home or at mine. I thought everyone was delighted by our close relationship, friendship. I dreaded returning to the mountains. I shared my fears with Yiping and told him I suspected that team leader Huang would not leave me alone. Yiping assured me he'd protect me. When I returned to my hut in the mountains, Cuihua greeted me at the door and said, "Welcome home. You're leaving." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Team leader Huang has transferred you," she said. "He was angry when he found you'd gone home." "But he gave me permission." "That's not the way he tells it now." "Where is he sending me?" You'll have to ask him, she said. I was angry and afraid as I hurried down to Team Leader Huang's hut. You cannot stay in my village anymore, he told me. Why not? You are a bad element, he said. They told me that when you arrived here, you proved it to me by going home without my permission. But you're being sent to Tongxing Brigade. You'll be an elementary school teacher. You're leaving tomorrow morning. Tongxing Brigade was 2 hours away and on an even higher mountain. When Cuihua heard the news, she said, You should be happy. No more field work. Now you can be a teacher, like Yiping. I was happy to be leaving the fields, yet it meant separation from Yiping, and I suspected this was precisely the punishment that Huang wanted for me. I began packing my things. That afternoon, I received another surprise. A letter from my father's sister, Aunt Ninghui, in Shanghai. I expected the letter to cheer me up. Dear Mao Mao, she began. Yesterday, I received a letter from your father. He told me you have a boyfriend. Boyfriend? I thought and blushed. That was the first time I'd heard the term used with reference to any of my friendships. Hearing the news, I had mixed feelings. I was happy because you have grown from a baby I once held in my arms, and you called me Mama, into the young lady you are today. I was sad, however, because of the possible, terrible consequences of this relationship in the countryside and what it might mean for your future. If you marry someone in the mountains, you will never be able to return to the city. Please think about this. Think about the misery you will bring to your parents. Think of the misery for you. Heed these words. You are on the brink of a precipice right now. Break off any relationship you have with this boyfriend. Don't be sentimental. You're young, beautiful, intelligent, and capable. You have a wonderful future ahead of you. Things will change someday. When they change, if you're settled down to a married life in the mountains, they will force you to remain there the rest of your days. There will be no hope for a return. Stop this horse at the edge of the cliff and avoid disaster. Your poor parents have suffered so much these past years. They're like feathers in a storm, blown from one place to another without any control over their lives. They cannot take any more difficulties. They have already eaten too much bitterness. You'll have many possibilities in the future. You will meet many men. They will be worth your love. Do not waste your life. When I finished, I dropped the letter and sat down, trembling. What's wrong? Bad news? 翠华 asked. I cried and could not speak for a long time. Finally, I went to my bed and lay there the rest of the afternoon. 翠华 picked up the letter and read it. Yimao, your aunt is right. I responded with more tears. Late that afternoon, I heard Yiping outside, calling my name. I didn't move. 翠华 let him in. A moment later, he appeared at my door. He saw I'd been crying. He came to my side and asked, "What's wrong?" Yiping, I began, but I choked on my own words. I wanted to tell him everything, but did not know where to start. I felt a profound love for him, but I had never expressed my feelings to him directly. When it came to saying anything openly romantic, I had always been tongue-tied. Now, when I needed to tell him, I could not do it. I handed him the letter and watched his expression change from curious to grave as he read. He slumped to the stool beside my bed, sighed deeply, and closed his eyes. Then he opened his eyes and looked at me. "We've been so silly," he said, just above a whisper. "Really, Yimao, we both knew what was happening, and yet we let it happen. We should have known this was hopeless." "No," I said. "It is not hopeless, Yiping." "Shh," he said. "Your aunt is a wise woman." I knew him well enough by now to see he was struggling to maintain his composure. But I did not know if he was telling me how he felt or if he was telling me what he thought I needed to hear. "Yiping," I said, "what is to be done? What do you want? What are your feelings?" "I don't know." I paused and added shyly, I'll do whatever you want." There was another long silence. "I know what I want, but it is impossible." "Why? Why is it impossible?" "Because we don't want to live the rest of our lives here. Even if we were together, it would crush us. We would someday come to regret it." "Don't say that." "Yes, it has to be said. We are from black families. All the rules are different for us." I looked at him, and my look told him I knew he was speaking the heartbreaking, undeniable truth. Emo, I think I know how you feel. I feel the same. It's like a dream, but we've dreamed too much. We've dreamed too far. No, I said, don't say that. You can't ignore what your aunt has written. She is right. Your parents have suffered so much. So have mine. So have we. Maybe if we just, I stammered. Maybe if we just waited. He finished my sentence. Maybe something will change, and then my feelings will never change, Yiping, I sobbed. Never. And neither will mine, he said. But that's not the point. He folded the letter and laid it next to me on the bed. He looked straight into my eyes and said, the truth is, Emo, that all of us are feathers in the storm. Your parents, my parents, the educated youth, and you and I. We control nothing, and we have been denying that. If our dreams are to come true, we have to stop here, now. No, I choked. I can't. He took my hand in his and grasped it tightly and held me with his warm gaze. Maybe I'm stronger than you. Maybe I'm not as blind as you. I don't know what it is, but I know this much. He released my hand and stood and looked away. Maybe some other time, he began wistfully. Maybe. He never finished. He stood and left the room. The next morning, I rose early and packed my belongings. I tore a page from my notebook and wrote a poem on it. Even when we are 1,000 miles apart, we will enjoy the same moon together. I folded neatly and left it in the middle of the table. On another page, I wrote a note to Cui Hua and asked her to give it to Yiping. I pulled on my jacket just as the cock crowed. I stepped outside and took a deep breath of the cold mountain air. I carried with me a box of books, a bag of clothing, and a badly broken heart. End of chapter 52.